Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Would you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, that's for that. Okay, where's my... Okay, I declare this meeting as a public hearing of the School Board of Lake County, Florida for the adoption of the tentative millage rates and the tentative budget for the 2019-20 fiscal year. At this time, we'll ask the Assistant Superintendent Business Services to give a brief presentation on the tentative millages and budget. Mr. Scott Ward.
Good afternoon, Chairman and board members. Just a real quick...
Excuse me? I'm sorry, but not, I thought your public input was for the next, but it's...
I'm sorry, we did the script today, and I apologize, but
We have a place on the program for the public input after he does this, okay? For what you're asking for on 3.01?
Maybe I'll answer your question. So just real quick, wanted to go through some of the numbers. The 2019-20 rollback millages. These are the calculated rollback rates. And again, the rollback rate is the rate that you charge to come up with last year's revenue. And since there's additional revenue, you typically would reduce your rate to the rollback millage, but that's not how our required local effort is. And plus the additional voted millage, there is no rollback millage for the additional voted millage because this is the first year that we're levying that. So you can see the rollback rates are 3.8733, 0.7054, 0 for the additional millage, 1.4147 for the capital outlay, so a total of 5.9934. Because our tentative millage is 6.8830 mils, it exceeds the rollback millage of 5.9934. We had to advertise a notice of tax increase. And so this is the tentative millages that we have today. The required local effort of 3.8850, which is set by the state of Florida in the legislation session. The non-voted discretionary millage, and I'm not sure if we have an option to go any lower than that. I know we can't go any higher than that, and that is the millage, even though it's non-voted discretionary. Every school district in the state does levy that. And then also we have the additional voted millage, which is a 0.75 mils. That is the voter-approved millage that was approved at the last referendum for us. And then the maximum capital outlay millage is 1.5, so a total of 6.8830. So I just want to do a little quick homeowner impact. Ad valorem taxes are taxes on real property and other income-producing property. 94% of our school taxable value comes from real property. In 2003, the ad valorem rate for schools was 8.395 mils. For 2020, the proposed millage rate is 6.8830 mils, including the additional voted millage. The Save Our Homes constitutional amendment limits the increase of our homestead property values to the lesser of the consumer price index with a 3%. And I did that to show you what a homeowner with a taxable value of $100,000 in 2003, that homeowner paid $843 in taxes to the schools. And you can see each year how as the value has increased, and that is the maximum increase that's allowed by the statute. You can see without the additional voted millage in 2020, they would actually be paying $857 for school taxes, so not much more than they were paying in 2003. This is what it looks like this year with the additional voted millage. You can see the large uptick at the end between 19 and 20, and that is the additional 0.75 mil. So for this year, that same homeowner would pay $962 for school taxes this year because of the additional voted millage levy. So these are the revenues from the millage. You can see the 2019-20 and the 2018-19 years, and you can see the additional or the difference on each one of those. So that's a total of $24.6 million increase over last year. 2.3 of that is the required local effort. 1.4 of that's discretionary local effort. And the 18 million is the additional voted, and then 2.8 million for the capital outlay. This Florida statute 200.0652E1 requires us to state the reasons for ad valorem tax revenues, the reasons why they're increasing, and I believe because we're having such a large increase because of the voter referendum, that it would be good to spell that out in specific language in the presentation and in today's meeting. So the increase in the required local effort millage is in order to comply with Florida Statute 1011.62 and to participate in the Florida education system. Increase in the non-voter millage revenues in order to receive the state compression funds, and also to address the additional security requirements of the Marjory-Stoneman Douglas Act, to provide additional student mental health behavior support to the schools, and our increase in our capital outlay revenues in order to address the capital outlay and debt service needs as advertised. This is our tentative budget for the additional voted millage. We've gone through this through several of our meetings. We have updated the millage now for the new taxable value, and that we're still giving the proportionate share after the district-wide cost to the charter schools. And then each of the items is listed there: the nurse at each school, mental health counselor at each school, social workers, additional psychologists, and a school suspension at each school, and then they're covering the difference between the safe schools and the SRO contracts. So just to go back over the additional voter millage today. And at this time, we can turn it over for the public input.
Actually, it says for me to talk to the superintendent first. It says, Superintendent, please read the statement required on the millage for the record.
The first issue to be discussed is the rollback rate. The rollback rate is defined as the millage rate necessary to generate the same amount of money that was raised the prior school year, but using the new property values after adjusting for new construction. The total millage to be levied is greater than the rollback rate by 14.84%. The purpose for which the ad valorem tax revenues are increased are due to the reasons that were just stated by Mr. Ward.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down there. This is a public hearing. Does anyone wish to address the board concerning this increase? And I think, Mr. Yocum, you had a couple items on the 3.01.
First of all, I'm wearing this Larry Metz t-shirt because those of you that probably all know that he used to be on this school board. And he went through the entire budget line by line. They had hearings on that. And instead, it's kind of drifted down to the point where we have hardly anything. I went online and I looked at the notice that you have. It doesn't say any of this information. That wasn't attached. You don't have handouts. The city of Tavares, who's 1/10 your size, this is what they give at their budget meetings when they discussed, and they had 2 of them in detail. And this is some 60 pages of PowerPoint. Now, I personally know that you are limited in your resources, and I agree with you. You have to fight hard to try and get money where you can. And so I'm not going to say anything other than I don't have confidence that I understand the reasons why, because this is the first time I've seen this information. You may have covered some of it in others, but it wasn't online. It wasn't handout for people. No available ability for people to even review that. And so I realize this is to set the maximum millage rate. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then you're still going to determine that later. So we still have time? No?
We don't set this rate. This comes down from Tallahassee.
Okay.
So while it's
the
tentative,
required effort, yeah.
It is what it
Okay.
is.
Okay, so just what I want to do is just let you know, I'm going to try and put together some sort of report that I think is valid for the taxpayer, because that's my hat, is a taxpayer hat, to provide information so that people can understand what is going on. Even trying to follow this, I couldn't understand because he went through the slides so fast. So probably there's not a whole lot I can do other than say that I think that this should have been information should have been more available earlier so that people could understand. And I know you've had meetings, and I've looked at them, but compared to the detail that we get from others, and it just isn't enough for me to feel confident that I understand it. However, because we got a great staff here, and you got progress, and I know that you're limited by the state, I'm not gonna quibble. I assume that you're just gonna ask all the questions and you're doing it internally, but someone on the outside like me, I can't validate that. I think it's a fair deal, okay? And, let's see, so I would hope that in the future you might have handouts that you have for the people that come here, and that you also include something that explains these things in detail. And yeah, part of it is I go to too many meetings. I go to cities, and I go to the county and the water authority, and
Go ahead, but your
Yes.
time is,
you think it's funny.
no, the time.
No.
All right, so, I just, would like to see maybe better sharing of information so that people can buy in on it easier. Because you are in a position, and you have been giving presentations, and I've seen those, and a lot of information to absorb. But in this case, for this one single meeting, I didn't think that there was enough to know, to agree with you. And with that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Stay there for a second, Vance. I just want to address some of your comments. Because for 6 years, we've done the same thing, and I've seen you here for 6 years.
Yep.
And that this is the tentative approval and tentative budget. We are not done with the budget yet. So you'll have an opportunity to weigh in. But this is
the
statutory.
maximum budget or the
No, no, no.
millage?
Okay, so unlike the municipalities that you have visited,
Right,
that we have no wiggle room on the millage rate. The state of Florida tells us what that millage rate is
yeah, I know
going
the
to be.
discretionary event.
Yeah. The discretionary is the only thing we have any, and being fair, we haven't looked at that. We max that out. We're maxed out the 0.75, we max out the 1.5. None of that's gonna change. But by statute, we have to have this meeting. We have to have it at 5:05.
Right, no,
It's almost like the Hangsman time or something. I don't even know exactly what established that. But it has always been transparent, and always has been the same way for the 6 years that I've been on the board. So I don't know what you're missing at this
Gee,
point.
but I'm-
Because, wait a minute, because we are yet to get into the minutia of the budget, because we just found out what the funding's gonna be. So that is the next exercise, and that will be totally transparent, and hope that you'll appreciate the work that's being done there.
And yes, I agree that I've seen this many times in the past and the process, but it's hard when you change every year. Every 3 years in a row now, we've changed the reporting methods or the information that's presented, and that I would like to see it presented for people, not me, but the new guy, the taxpayer that comes in, and the new homeowners that are buying here. And they are finding that, whoa, they're getting hit with these taxes that they don't understand. And that's what I hope.
Well, I think that with your millage rate going down, even though because of the number of homes, it appears it's going up, that's how it has to be advertised, but the millage rate has gone down. So, I don't know,
It would be helpful if there was a trend.
I think it's
Report.
7.14 right now, right?
One of the things through most of these presentations is I look for a trend, and yes, you've got that, and that's good. So you
Yeah.
got off on
But,
that one.
but,
So I think,
well,
you know.
and the challenge is, and again, Hakuna Matata, so we can go back and say what you enjoyed about in the past or not. But the fact is, we have a new CFO.
Right.
Now we call you Assistant Superintendent, sorry. And that every intent is to be transparent, where I can't always say as a board member that was the case in the past, okay? So I am totally happy with the work that you're doing, Mr. Ward, and I think that you'll appreciate it more as we go down the road. That's all.
Okay. Pressure's on.
All right.
On me, I guess.
All right. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Ward?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify again, this theater that we go through every year, where we read the script, and then you do an advertisement, and the advertisement is sent to us from the state, and it's laid out exactly how you have to advertise it. And so really, if somebody were to have a quibble, it would be really a quibble with the legislatures, because we really have absolutely no say in this theatrical process, correct?
A lot of what we were doing here today is set specifically by the term requirements. A lot of the language that we used, the explanations, A lot of the advertisements are very well laid out by the trim process. And really what we want to do is we want to make sure we cross all our Ts, dot all our Is, so that we don't violate and then have to go re-advertise. And that second advertisement is not just put it in the newspaper. That second advertisement or re-advertisement requirement is to resend all the trim bills out to all of the constituents in the county. It's very expensive to do so. So we really want to follow these very strict guidelines in getting this information through this hearing today and at the final.
And discretionary is called discretionary, but it's not really discretionary, because if we were to change it, we would potentially compromise our ability to get
Yes,
state funding.
The basic discretionary that's the maximum, is the .748. If you change that by going lower, you're not allowed to go any higher, but if you change it by going lower, then you lose your compressionary funds, which is about $6 million for our school district. Plus, you would lose the funding of the basic discretionary, which would be about $17 million. So if we all decided to not vote that discretionary, you'd be giving up over $20 million.
Right. So in my opinion, it's not, the word discretionary is probably not the proper word to use there.
A little bit of an oxymoron. And the other thing, clarifier is we do have the ability to go lower on the basic millage.
The required local effort? No, sir, we cannot go lower on the required local effort.
Not
Because
local- The required local effort, we cannot go lower? I
No,
thought we
sir.
could vote to go
no,
lower.
because
I thought we couldn't vote to go higher.
No, sir. We cannot vote higher or lower on the required local, because that is the level of effort that the state has decided that we have to do at the local level. So there's no option to go higher or lower.
Not that I would, since we're 62nd out of 67 counties in funding.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
But in your presentations that you did throughout the county and areas, didn't you do something of this nature here?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought.
Yes, sir.
So, okay. All right. All right. Will you now give the brief explanation of the trim procedures and requirements?
Well, I think you're going to vote on the resolution.
I'm just reading the
Villages
script.
first.
All right, Superintendent, what's your recommendation?
I recommend that the board adopt Resolution 2019-03, determining the tentative millages to be levied for the fiscal year 2019-2020. Included are the required local effort, including the prior period funding adjustment millage of 3.885 mils, the basic discretionary of .748 mils, the capital outlay millage of 1.5 mils, and additional voter millage of .75 mils, for a total of 6.883 mils. Revenues generated by this levy total, generating general operating, $111,878,320. Capital outlay, $36,222,206. Additional voter, $18,111,103, for a total of $166,211,629.
So moved.
Oh, go ahead and read it.
Say, may I have a motion on the superintendent's
So moved.
recommendation on the 2019-03?
Still moving.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
Did I miss the page?
No, it says this is a public hearing.
I know, but we already did that.
Oh, do we have an
This is on the
extra
next item, next resolution, so keep reading
Well, I know, but it's up there. Okay,
for a different item.
yeah, but, okay.
Oh, so we can't have voted. We shouldn't have voted.
Yes,
Yeah, we did.
you just approved the resolution,
Right.
2019.03. There's another one to follow, which will be 2019.04. It's that we're now moving on to
Would
the
you
second
please-
item.
I'll have to work on the script. So
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Thank you. So this is the budget summary that we advertised in the newspaper. It went out, I believe, in Friday's newspaper ad, but it's basically showing you the different funds, the funding, the revenues and transfers, fund balances, and then the ending fund balances. There are going to be refinements of this, obviously, between now and the final budget, but the bottom line, the total of all funds is 684, 832, 634 should remain the same. It'll just be adjustments between revenues, appropriations, et cetera. And again, we will not be able to change the millages up. We can't increase the millages, but we can move the budget up and down. So just wanted to explain that real quick, so we can open it up for.
Okay. Okay, this is the public hearing. Does anyone wish to address the board concerning the tentative millage rates? And Mr. Yocum, you wanted to speak to this as well, I think? Well, you've got 3.01, 3.02.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Is that 3.05?
There
Okay.
should be 4. There's a 5th one, too.
It's
All
'cause you're
right.
so easy.
Superintendent?
I recommend that the board approve Resolution 2019-04, adopting the tentative budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year in the amount of $684,832,634.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Superintendent? Oh, there.
Yeah, there's another public hearing to follow regarding the tentative budget, if anyone would like to speak to that, but I'm not the chair.
It's to set the date and time.
I'm confused.
Me too. This is a public hearing. Does anyone wish to, the board concerning the tentative budget?
You just did that.
We
I know,
agreed to
but
that.
I'm just reading the script.
I
Come on,
apologize.
Vance, they're
I
begging you to come
apologize
up.
for the script.
Just to be clear, the first one was for the millage rate, or the previous one was for the millage rate. This
You just asked a minute ago, and Vance said no.
is the budget,
But we just did that.
And Vance
didn't
said no.
He offered it up.
and there's a third one in here for
Right,
some
right.
reason.
Well, that's what,
It
To do it
doesn't hurt
again?
to ask if anyone wants to speak and eliminate.
all right.
Come on,
Superintendent.
Vance, get up here.
All right, I recommend that the board declare that the final budget hearing for the approval of the final millage rates and budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year will be held on Monday, September 9th, 2019, in the Lake County Commission chambers at 5:05 PM.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We're going to skip to the superintendent part.
All right, this concludes the required action for the first public hearing on the 2019-2020 tentative millage rates and budget for the Lake County schools.
Do you need to read that? All right. Then that concludes this meeting, the first called meeting. To the next meeting, and we've already did the pledge and all. If that's okay, we'll bypass that. We have a public input card, Mr. Stuart Klatt from the Teachers Union.
Good afternoon. First off, congratulations to our superintendent on her dancing skills. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
So, then let's see. Tomorrow, we're starting 318, at least, brand-new teachers into Lake County. So I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming them. I did have a couple questions. One of the budget documents I got from February 2019. Let me back up. In the preliminary comparison of revenue, a couple of the speech and language therapists came to me and had some questions about the Medicaid income. And on the comparison, it talks $455,000 for 1920 in Medicaid income. Yet in February of 19, it shows a Medicaid income revenue of roughly $1.2 million. Is there a fee-for-service line that I'm not seeing in here?
No, sir. The 1.2 was budgeted last year.
No, this is income from a operating budget amendment.
I'd have
Got
to
it
look,
from
I'd
your
have to look at the
office.
detail. But we have revised, what the budget that you're looking at there was the preliminary. That's not the tentative, it was earlier. We have revised and we have increased the revenue budget for
Okay.
Medicaid at this point in time. Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
I asked that question during a workshop, and I believe the answer was that it was, there was Medicaid that we always applied for, and so, like, the new Medicaid that the speech and language therapist was like a different category. So
that's
that
why
was
I
my
asked for fee for service now. What you're talking about is the administrative
Like
component.
tile.
And that's, there's some weird conglomerations there, but we can talk about that later. But I was just looking for fee for service specifically. So I was wondering if
I'm
it was in
sorry.
there. I'm sorry. And where I might find it. Siri's talking back to me. So, all right, I was just, you know, and I commend the board. We need to go through the budget and look for every scrap of penny we can, because teachers need a raise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. That was, Vance, your 3.02 was for the last one, not this one, right? Yes. Okay. I didn't want to short you out. And I apologize. Vance, I apologize for the little humor that you thought we had up here, but we had forgotten to start the clock, and so we did not time you, and that's where that came in. No, sir. No, sir.
I think you got 5 minutes instead, because I didn't realize I was supposed to time during a
But
hearing.
I just wanted you to know, I was not laughing at what you were talking about. It was about what was been forgotten, and I apologize. Okay, 3.01, Lake County Schools Mental Health Assistance Allocation Plan. That's not Dr. Emily.
This is Dr. Landry.
Dr. Landry.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to join you again, Chairman, Superintendent, board members, to continue our conversation about the mental health plan for Lake County Schools. Last week, I uploaded a version of our plan, a proposed draft. I think Ms. Challenger made you copies. And so I want to make sure that I answer any and all of the questions that you have. I do want to say that our plan this year is just a natural evolution of last year's plan. So last year's plan was a whole bunch of goals that we wanted to meet, and then this year's plan kind of outlines the goals that we've met and where we're going forward. What I would like to do first is walk you through this PowerPoint. You have a copy. I would like to share with you just some information about current legislation that is important and impacting our plan. And then we'll just give you some highlights of the plan, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. So the original legislation, of course, was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. Remember that big Senate bill, 7026? And last year, one of the important parts of the bill was that we could spend 90% of our money on this bullet right here, basically provision of mental health assessment, diagnosis, intervention, treatment, and recovery to students who are already at risk. So last year, our plan had to be built 90% around that bullet. Okay, so essentially what we had to do was first address those kids who are already at risk or in need. Okay, and that's changed this year. That's why I'm bringing that back to you. The big bill this year was the Senate Bill 7030, and it became effective July 1st, and it amends the original Marjorie Stoneman Douglas with the recommendations of the Public Safety Committee that was formed to take a look at that tragedy and see what things we could do to strengthen our school safety and our mental health services. So this bill 7030 is very large. The provisions are meant to talk about the mental health allocation plan, which is me, the school safety measures, which is Mr. Roy, and then the threat risk assessment processes that we're doing, and that's really where Mr. Roy and I are partnering. And he's here if we have any questions about that. So this year, the law is a little bit broader. They're not limiting the amount of ways that we can spend. I guess I have to do this, right?
So we were looking for the remote.
I have it down here.
She's hiding it.
We'll never get through.
There you go.
Okay, I'm with it now, thank you. So this year, what we're allowed to focus on is 100% of our money and allocation has to go to that first bullet, right, those kids at risk, and then also these. So awareness and prevention, basically is coming into focus a little bit more for this year's plan, and it is reflected in our plan. So the state said, we know we said 90% last year, but now we want to broaden that. We want everybody to focus on prevention and awareness as well. Okay, so that's written in our plan.
90% of what amount?
The allocation, everything that we received, it was about $1 million last year.
Will it be the same this year, or do we
It
have?
is slightly more, but it is essentially the same.
But even last year at $1 million, it covered 1/10 of what we really needed. So we shouldn't have followed meeting statute.
I agree. Yes. I think it was good of them to actually recognize that awareness and prevention is very important. And so that's kind of what they've done this year. Okay.
But they didn't increase it to what it needed to be is the problem.
No, sir, I don't believe so.
It is that categorical in the FFP, right?
It is?
Okay.
But our citizens did. That's
Yes.
even more important.
Right.
That's where most of the funding, the 0.75, that were blessed because they stepped up.
Absolutely. And I'm going
Exactly.
to outline that in just a moment, because I agree, that's very important to highlight. So also important part of Senate Bill 7030 are some mandated timelines. So now all districts are going to have to develop policies and procedures that will ensure that students who are referred for a screening are assessed within 15 days of that referral. School-based services have to be initiated within 15 days of identification. And they've given us a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to community services. So for example, LifeStream, those services must be initiated within 30 days of the referral.
So, like, what kind of a student are we talking about? What kind of mental health at this? I mean, are we looking at somebody who's antsy and might have ADD, or are we looking at somebody who? Because this looks to me like either very fast or very slow, depending on. I mean, are we talking somebody who's suicidal?
So-
in which case it would be slow. you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so our response to suicide ideation is immediate, and that's in this plan as well. What they are talking about is really the implementation of services. So if someone says, I have a concern about a student, or they're referred through a referral pathway, which is in this document as well, we have 15 days to make sure somebody has their eyes on that child and that case and that family, okay? And then if we decide that they need to receive services, we have 15 days in the school system, the community agencies have 30 days to implement and get the services started.
Okay.
So it's pretty fast. I think one of the complaints, the challenges I would say that we've had is that a lot of our community partners have backlogs, right? And we're not able to get the kids services maybe as quickly as we'd like. Well, the state's now stepped in and said you must.
Well, also, we were backlogged ourselves, were we not?
We were.
Yeah. So this allows us to hire the extra people that we need to stay on top of it.
So have the community agencies been able to, I guess, bolster their resources as well? Yeah, I go back to when I was teaching, and there was a student of mine who was referred to Livestream, and they said, well, it'll be a few months before we can get you in. We see that you need to come, but it'll be months.
The answer to that is yes.
Because now that would not be an answer. So,
No, that would not, absolutely not be an
So
answer.
how does that work?
So how that works is if there is a backlog with a live stream area, and still there are some, it's definitely not months anymore. They've hired a lot more of their counselors. But if there is a backlog, we now have 13 other private agencies that we contract with. And
Okay.
so we try to use our community partners as much as we can, but if there's a backlog, I have backup with 13 other agencies that
Okay.
provide these services.
Good.
Okay, so there's the timelines I've been fretting about. There's another Senate Bill, 1418, that really delineates what it means to be a suicide prevention certified school. And the bill really has to do with, here's what the schools need to do, and it has to do with the level of instruction and advertisement of being a suicide prevention certified school. My goal by the end of the year is to have all of our schools be suicide prevention certified. The requirements are pretty low, and we're going to be doing that kind of instruction with the schools anyway, so I am hoping that we'll be able to meet that goal. This is not a mandate by the state at all. It's just that if you would like for your schools to be suicide prevention certified, here are the things that you have to do, okay? And I would like for us to get on board with doing those things. Another important piece of, excuse me, did you have a question?
And what are those things?
It has to do with instruction, like 2 hours minimal of instruction for every person on your staff. and then advertising that you are certified, and then retraining each year. So another Florida statute that addresses continuing education and in-service training for youth mental health awareness and assistance. This is getting a lot of attention because the state has put the bar pretty high. So what they're expecting us to do is train all of our staff in youth mental health first aid, which that's a program that I've talked to you about a few times. It's a 6-hour face-to-face course. We already have a leg up on this. We've been training this in our district for several years because of a grant we had 4 or 5 years ago. But still, this is 6 hours. At first, the training was 8 hours. The National Council's original training was 8 hours, but in the pushback from the school systems, they made it 6 hours, but it's still 6 hours face-to-face. It's a one whole day. So this is the expectation from the state, that everyone will receive this training. And again, it's that basic, how do I recognize kids who are possibly having a challenge? How do I talk with them about that? And how do I get them to a professional to help them? Very basic, right? So because they realize that we probably will not be able to complete that rollout in fewer than a few years, they've partnered with Cognito. Cognito has designed a supplementary online training that will provide our folks with additional capacity to understand mental health and mental awareness until we can get everybody trained in the gold standard, which is the youth mental health first aid. This program is actually pretty amazing. It's an online interactive simulation, and it's brief. What's required in the implementation is 1 hour face-to-face with someone, a facilitator at every school, which would be the mental health liaisons, right, now that we have one of those in every school. So they would facilitate the staff. Here's what this training's about, and then everyone would go on their own and complete this 1 hour training. And it's very cool. You're an avatar, and you're actually talking with students who might have challenges or who are expressing some concerns. And the facilitators, the computer program kind of guides you in the words that you're using and the choices that you're making to talk with kids. It's actually really informative and very fun. And I like it because the only other way we can teach people how to talk to kids is to role play with them. And people don't like to role play. It's embarrassing, and people just don't like it. This way, you're in private, and you're making the choices of the conversation that you'd like to have and getting feedback immediately from the program. So we are going to be offering this to all Lake County School employees at the beginning of the school year through the facilitation of the mental health liaisons on their campus. So it's a pretty easy way to get lots of awareness out there pretty quickly. So the state's partnered with these folks to ask us to do that. Okay?
How long is this program?
So this program requires the facilitator to introduce for about 10 minutes. They go 1 hour online individually, and then they come back together with the facilitator for about 50 minutes to talk about their experiences and then outline crises procedures and referral procedures at their school. So it kind of has a dual purpose. So it's 2 hours maximum versus the 6 hour face-to-face.
I just want to reiterate, because I've spoken with LCA prior, that we will ensure that this training is offered during their contracted day, and it will not be something that they'd be asked to do above and beyond their regular time.
So is this, like, do we expect them to do this during pre-planning or on a?
No, what we're hoping to do is roll it out kind of in staff meetings. So as they come together, this will be part of their staff meeting with their principals.
So this is mainly the instructional side, not the classified?
We would love it to be everyone. The special planning has to go into how we train.
Well, because it says to all, and that's, I just wanted to make sure that we're,
More planning is needed there,
okay.
because those groups are a little harder to get to. But yes, absolutely, bus drivers, cafeteria, anybody who touches children's lives, we really should have at least some of this training.
Is this open for parents to view? Is this something that's public?
So I'm talking with Cognito right now about the possibility of a parent portal to where they might also be able to go in and access some of these modules, if you will.
Do you have, or do you guys anticipate having a Q&A if there's a parent that wants to know what we're telling teachers or what we're telling some of our service workers? What are these conversations looking like for kids? If there's somebody that's got a concern about topics that might be brought up by an educator, or
That's a good
if they
question.
can't see it themselves, is there something we can put together that just says this is kind of our stick to, our basics?
Yes, absolutely, and they can always be referred to the mental health liaison who's on their campus, because they will be fully trained and would be happy. I can't think of any reason why, if a parent was interested, you couldn't sit with them and walk through the module with them.
Okay.
So that they could actually see it. But that's a good point, like, because this can be a very sensitive topic, and we want to be transparent to students, to parents, so, okay, let me write that down. Anything else about that? Okay, this one is very new, so you may have heard us talking about it. It was just signed in July 17, and now what the state is asking us to do, and Ms. Luke, this addresses something that we talked about at a previous meeting. We need to train our students. We need to talk with them about mental health awareness, prevention. Where do I go if I need help? So now the state rule has come down that we need to train 5 hours minimally of required instruction in mental and emotional health for students in grades 6 through 12. So in the rule, here's what's outlined. By December 1st, we have to submit an implementation plan for how we plan to do that. And then by July of 2020, we just have to submit our annual report to the commissioner to verify that we completed it. So we have some things that we're talking about. This is difficult and it involves multiple departments, and so I'm certainly talking with other departments about this. I'm waiting also for more direction from the state. My chief bureau at our bureau at the state has always been very supportive in terms of these mandates and how do we make that happen in schools. So I really do anticipate that they're going to send down some more information for how we make this work.
Yeah,
Is this in addition to the 6 hours they're having to take for bullying or something?
Bullying?
What is the requirement? Kurt Benny called me, so he was taking his daughter over to this course that was required. 6 hours. Everybody knows?
I'm not sure what you're
Ms.
referring to.
Cockcroft, do you know?
You know what I'm talking about at all? Do we have
You mean
any
the
kind of
kids?
course about bullying or anything that the kids had to take before the school year started? That may have been an excuse on Kurt's part to go get a beer. I don't know. I'm going to text him right now.
So I just wanted to let you know that we are aware, this is out there, we're working on it. Haven't quite come up with the solutions yet, but this requirement is in the plan. You will see, of course, I've said we're going to do that, we're just not sure exactly how. Questions on the legislation before I move into the plan?
What is the idea? I mean, like, what does that look like?
The instruction for kids?
Yeah.
So what other districts are doing is stuff like putting a curriculum in a course that touches every student, like ELA.
I hate that idea. I know we're doing the masses. Dr. Burns, may I? I'm hugely in favor of that. Like, I'm actually really impressed that it came forward because with middle schoolers, and I've actually dealt with this, and I'm just going to be really vague, but they don't come to a teacher and say, I'm having thoughts of suicide. They tell their peers, and their peers don't know what to do. So what we see, and there's been series and so forth on Netflix, whatever, but kids try to solve their own problems, and they're not adults, and they don't make the best decisions. And so if we could educate our kids on what to do, if somebody texts you and says, I'm going to kill myself for a 13-year-old, that's heavy. Cutting themselves, listen, we've been exposed to more things than I would have liked to be exposed to already with an 8th grader. So I like the idea of at least telling them this is maybe what to do, so that if a kid gets that text message at 10:30 at night from a friend, they don't like, what do I do, or not tell anybody, which would probably be the worst thing to do. With the idea of doing it whole group, I just feel like all I can see in my head is the health and human growth and
Yes.
development, which is kind of a joke, for lack of a better word, but like the kids don't take it seriously, and this
Yeah.
is something that should be taken seriously. So if there's a small group setting and availability with some of our people that we have, mental health liaisons, guidance counselors, school nurses, and all those people could get together and arrange just a small group where they understand the seriousness of it. It's heavy. I didn't know what to do as a parent. Like, when it came in front of me, I was like, well, so I do think it's super important. The idea of grazing across it in a ELA class is.
Right. Like, yeah, that was sort of my thought was with my children, we're very straightforward
Yeah.
about mental illness, but we're also a family that has a lot of experience with mental illness, so not all people have experience with mental illness, so I would like there to be a professional who is involved, like somebody who, one of our mental health people, as opposed to, ELA teachers,
So, so is that what you're envisioning, that the mental health person would come in and do this instruction, or?
We don't know.
I get that it's complicated because, right, you can't put it into PE or health or something because not every kid takes that subject and they miss it, right? They miss that content. So it's got to be something that everybody's taking. But at the same time, you say, I've just now given up a week of ELA instruction.
Right.
Granted, this is important too, but
But there may be some other ways that we can do
yeah,
that.
so I guess I'm really interested, and I know you haven't developed it yet, right? You got till December 1st.
Yes.
I know.
So are we imagining this is taking place during second semester?
Well, we have through July to get it implemented.
Yeah.
So it is, I want to try and be creative and do something that's going to be different and impactful. I don't know if you're aware of Sandy Hook Promise programs. That's also in our plan. They have some lovely programs for kids. I'm just not sure, and they're not sure if they tick all the boxes for this piece of legislation. They're trying to, they would love to partner with the state, I'm sure, to roll this out. I'm just not sure it's going to tick all the boxes, but we'll see, and I'll keep you informed. Okay, it is going to be it's a big ask, but it's important. Fantastic. Okay, so I just want to jump over to hit the highlights of our plan. One of the big pieces of our plan, if you remember from last year, was to increase access that students have to mental health professionals, right? So this is the slide that I showed you last year, where, we're kind of discussing, well, who are these wonderful mental health professionals that we already have? And we were so fortunate, we already have school psychologists, social workers, school counselors, and nurses. But as we look at those recommended allocations, I think it was maybe a little bit eye-opening to some of y'all how far we were away from recommended allocations. So this is the chart now of where we stand. And again, Mr. Mathias, you're so spot on that because of the foresight of our citizens, and they understand that this is important, and they've entrusted us with their money to spend it, to be stewards of it, to build mental health services. And so that's what we were able to hire a lot of these folks from the referendum money. So now we're so fortunate, we have a mental health liaison hired for every school. I have, I think, 3 positions still not hired, but I'm going to get there. We have been allocated more school psychologists and more social workers. And also from the referendum money, I'm so pleased to share with you that we now have a school nurse at every school. It's amazing. Like, I didn't think we were going to get there because school nurses are hard to come by. But I don't know. They rain down from the heavens. I still have people saying, do you need a school nurse? So I'm so pleased that we got all those filled. And then, of course, we will continue with the 6 mental health specialists at the district for another year in order to oversee and run the entire program. So I want to call your attention to the blue box. If you put all these professionals together and look at the ratio, it's 1 mental health professional to 171 students.
What, on your school nurse, what?
Yes, sir.
What qualifies or quantifies a RN versus an LPN?
So they have a different scope of work. So LPNs cannot do official nursing assessment.
But I mean, at some schools, may have an RN where,
Oh, I see what you mean.
where other schools we have an LPN. So what would quantify the need for that RN at that school versus an LPN? Is what I'm
We
asking.
didn't really conceptualize it that way.
Okay,
Okay, instead what we did was, if you recall, previously we've only had RNs at the district level.
Right.
And LPNs out in the schools. What we try to do now is push RNs into the schools as well. So we have RNs peppered throughout the district, so they are running a clinic and supervising 2 other clinics. So because LPNs have to be supervised by RNs legally, right? So what we've done is push the RNs out into the district, and so now that's the way we conceptualize it. We really haven't looked at needs, like a higher school need doesn't have an RN. It balances itself because that RN is going to work that clinic, but also be responsible for 2 other schools. So you really don't want to put an RN at the highest neediest school.
so
Does
then
that make sense?
the 6 that will be at the county, what are they going to be supervising?
No, so there are now 3 at the county,
Okay,
and the rest have been pushed out into the schools.
okay.
And they must
there'll be
handle
schools.
training, the
Wait.
3 at the county? What did they do?
Yes, training, they're running the program. Working with the Department of Health and building all the things that we need, yeah. Make sense?
Because, yeah, I mean, but like I said, I just wanted, because I've been asked a question, why do you need an RN if you can get an LPN? So that gives the answers right there.
LPNs cannot
Because
work on
they're-
their own license.
Well, they're supervising other LPNs. That's a school close by them, so they're responsible for that school plus 2 other schools.
Yes, sir.
As far as that. Because they were looking at the dollar figures, trying to make it go further, but
We've stretched it just about as far as you can go because they've got to have supervision. I mean, some districts have all RNs.
I think this is, and there again,
They're also not 62nd out of
All right,
67
no,
counties.
fair enough. fair
but,
enough.
but I think there again, it just goes back to the public approving the .75 so that we could do this, so that we do have a licensed nurse, whether it be an LPN or RN at each of our schools in the
school.
district. And I thank them for that.
Yes, oh, me too. I'm so grateful to the people of Lake County.
So now this new ratio of 1 to 171, I mean, that sounds great.
Oh, you're going to pick apart my math. That's
But
not
no,
gonna be
I'm
nice.
not picking apart your math. And I love that we're striving to obviously have an abundance of services out there more available than were ever before in Lake
Yes,
County, right? I mean, there's
yes.
I'm not going to discount the strides we've made. And I mean, we've also, luckily the voters have trusted us to be able to do that. But really, we're so distant to some of these recommended allocations, right? I mean, we got to hire 3 times as many psychologists or 4 times as many social workers to get to the recommended number. So these caseloads or these workloads for those specific people, how are they going to?
They're very doable. So my psychologists and social workers are skipping down the halls with just 2 schools. That's how we're assigning them. 1 school, 1 social worker and 1 psychologist per 2 schools. Last year, they had 4 or 5
Sure.
schools each, so the workload is much reduced.
So certainly they're going to feel like they've got a little more time to spend with each person who needs their attention, right?
Yes?
But well, I guess my question is, who's come up with this recommended allocation? Because like the recommended allocation for school psychologists is 1 for every 500, so that's like 2 per school.
Yeah.
Versus 1 per every other school.
And so I agree. So these recommendations come from the national associations. So the National Association for School Psychologists would love it if there were 2
course they
psychologists
would,
for every
okay.
school, right? But when we first started having these conversations, and I was talking with the superintendent about, well, what would be a good balance here? We can't meet the recommendation. I wouldn't even recommend the recommendations. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's not what we need. We need a good balance of professionals across the entire district, and 1 per 2 schools feels great to me. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
But that balance feels good to me.
Is it really 1 per 2, or are we doing something about East Ridge?
Right now, it's 1 per 2,
Okay.
okay?
So that person at East Ridge is stretched a lot more than people
Well,
maybe in the north
you would
end.
think, but what school psychologists do, their loads are very different. Their casework is very different at high schools than at middle schools and elementary schools. The actual very heaviest loads come from the big elementary schools.
Oh.
Right, so it's just different work,
I
but
would
we,
have thought teenagers. I would be teenagers.
okay,
All right. You better move on.
I just threw this graphic here because I really love it, because it doesn't matter what discipline in the mental health field that you subscribe to, all of our services are wrapped around the schools and the students. Okay, and so we talked about the people and how we got more folks, and then the next big part of our plan is how are we going to deliver those services? And essentially, the answer is through the MTSS framework that we already have in place. This is the state's conceptualization of the MTSS triangle. And we are doing more of these things this year. So here are a couple important points about MTSS. It promotes mental wellness for all students, if you remember. All students are a part of this framework. It identifies and addresses problems before they escalate. So we want to get interventions in place as soon as we recognize those students. And you must have access to adequate staffing, which now we've talked about that we are improving on. So here for Lake County Schools, here's what our services are looking like across the tiers. I showed you a slide like this last year, and it was much smaller. This slide is huge now, and there are actually some things that aren't even on here. I realized last night, for example, trauma-sensitive schools. Ms. Burns, you and I talked about that last year. That's a baseline training that we're going to be doing at all the schools. Now that we can focus more on prevention and awareness, now we can do that more directly at all the schools. Cognito, the program I just talked to you about, is not on here. So I'm sharing this graphic with you just so you can see that there are lots of choices for schools to work with. I'm not telling schools what they need to do with their school. What I'm doing is providing them with options and asking them to work with their leadership team to decide what will work best at their school. Okay, so I just wanted you to see that there are lots of options. I don't want you to forget about our partnership with Livestream. They have been able to write some grants and get some extra money to do a couple of very wonderful things. They have another community action team. Those teams are wraparound services for the neediest of the students and their families. And then the mobile response team is a 24/7 availability for any kind of crisis that our families have. And they have been used at the schools quite frequently, and they're doing very, very well. Lots of positive response to the mobile response team, and that's through Livestream. And then finally, I wanted to remind you of the barrier that we talked about last year, that sometimes students need service, but they're underinsured or not quite insured in the right way, and that was a barrier for them getting services. So we have that pot of money that we've created for Livestream, where they service those students, and they take money from our allocation plan in doing so. That's been working wonderfully, and we'll continue that in our plan for next year.
Did we expend the full amount last year?
Well, we got started late, so no, we didn't. But in my conversations with Mr. Ward, I know categorical money rolls, but if you look at the average per month, it is going to be about 250.
Oh, so it's actually going to meet a need.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to share with you that, you know, we can have all these things in place, but it's very important that kids actually get to the referral, right? Like someone needs to make a referral. So one thing we've built are these things called referral pathways, and it's lots of ways that students can get the services that they need. You may not be aware, but now on the student enrollment forms, parents are asked to share with us whether or not their students have ever received mental health services in the past. And if they check that yes box, remember, we have 15 days to get with that parent, find out what those services were, and if we can continue those services. So now we have something, as soon as students enroll, that helps us identify whether or not they have needs. The school problem-solving teams, threat risk assessment teams, again, Mr. Roy's here if you care to ask any questions about that. Teachers, parents, families can refer. And, of course, self-referral for kids who are older. You can always refer yourself for some help, right? Okay, let's see. So last year, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of data. If a school needed help from a mental health liaison, and these are individual students, they filled out requests for services, and so that was a way for us to track data, and I just wanted to show you that the 6 mental health specialists saw 458 cases last year, and that was just of individual students who need, like, there's a barrier, I need help. So 458 for about half the years when we got that process in place. So we're pretty pleased with how much they're accessing the services. And then finally, I just wanted to, this is in our plan, and I wanted to make you aware that bringing a consistent process for suicide ideation, crises, is outlined in this infographic that we share with principals, counselors, and it really gives them steps to take so that we can hopefully reduce the number of Baker Acts that are happening from our schools. Okay, that's one of our goals, is to get services around those kids and not have to send them to the hospital. Okay, so I think that that's my last slide, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now about the plan or about these slides.
I want to go back for just a second. So I texted the dad to find out what he was talking about. Now, keep in mind, this is a dad, so probably he needed to have his wife on the line. But his child goes to Windy Hill Middle School, and he said it was a middle and high school curriculum that dealt with mental health, and they had to take it before school started. So do we have any clue now what that was?
Sometimes teachers will require things.
Well, I'm a parent of Windy Hill Middle students, and my kids are not doing any.
They didn't do
core
4 hours?
service.
He said it was 4 hours.
4
I don't know.
hours.
His kids may have been lying.
I've not heard of anything. I will ask,
I'm
because if
wondering
there's
if
something
it,
that's,
I'm sorry.
He says here, new DOE rules require certain hours added to MS and high school, MS and HS. I had asked him what that was. He said middle school, high school, curriculum for mental health.
I'm going to say it is probably an individual school initiative. I know that in some of our schools, they are trying to get some students trained as ambassadors. They've incorporated that with one of the things we talked about at our summer leadership about that whole mobility issue and how students who come into a new school often struggle to build relationships and make friends. And so I know a lot of our schools are adopting that as part of an ambassador program. So his daughter is probably being one of those students who was
Who was asked
identified
specifically to
as,
come.
because of her role in leadership and developing some special skills. So I would say that that's probably, if I had to guess, related to, because I know another school is doing something similar.
Thanks.
mystery solved.
They may
hope.
want to
I'm
let you in
guessing.
on that too, huh?
And I know that because at the dancing event, the young man from Leesburg High School that spoke about his involvement with AP
Amazing.
digital design, whatever program he was a part of, he was an amazing young man. He is heading up the ambassador program at Leesburg High School, so we had an in-depth conversation about that, so.
Very cool.
So he went in for training.
Yes, he has been working and training in some of that.
That's probably
And
what it is.
yes, it wasn't specific to bullying, but that was one of the key components of that, is how do we as students help to intervene, and how do we stop such things as bullying as well as crisis identification of peers and things, so.
I love that
yeah.
idea.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Love it, yeah.
Great work.
Thank you, Mr. Mathias.
All right. No one else have anything? Thank you, Dr. Lane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 3.02, the final approval of revisions to School Board Policy 8.80, and I believe, Mr. Johnson, that's you?
Yes, sir.
So was there a vote on this? Do we vote?
We need to vote on that?
Is it actionable?
Yes.
Okay, you just said topic.
I'm recommending approval of the Lake County Schools Mental Health Assistance Allocation Plan.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. We had a 5-0 on that, by the way, Natalie.
That's right, 5-0.
4.5.
Steve?
Yes, sir. We're here tonight for final approval of School Board Policy 8.80, School Safety Student Records. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to this policy, please come forward to the podium at this time. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent?
Recommend final approval of revisions to Policy 8.80, School Safety Student Records.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Mr. Johnson, the 5.0.
Yes,
10,
sir.
I'm sorry.
Matter before the board is final approval of revisions to School Board Policy 5.10, requirements for original entry. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to this policy, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see one coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent, what's your recommendation?
Recommend final approval of revisions to Policy 5.10, requirements for original entry.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Mr. Johnson, 3.04.
The next one is, 3.04 has 4 policies incorporated into one action. Is there any board member that wishes to remove one or any of the 4 policies for separate consideration? Seeing none, the matter before the board is final approval to delete school board policies 8.10 safety, 8.17 emergency disaster, 8.18 emergency closing of schools, and 8.19 security plan. If there's anyone that wishes to speak to any of these policies, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent?
Recommend final approval of deletion of policies 8.10, emergency disaster, 8.18, emergency closing of school, and 8.19, security plan.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Three-
Mr. Johnson?
3.05 is final approval of 6 new policies. Is there any board member that wishes to consider any of those 6 policies separately? Seeing none, this matter is the final approval of board policies 8.111, school safety and security, 8.112, school safety, emergency management, emergency preparedness, and emergency response agencies, 8.113, safe school officers, 8.114, reports of suspicious activity and potential threats to schools, 8.115, plant security, and 8.116, video surveillance and electronic monitoring. If there's anyone here that wishes to speak to any of these policies, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent?
Recommend final approval of the new policies 8.111, school safety and security, 8.112, school safety emergency management, emergency preparedness, and emergency response agencies, 8.113, school or safe school officers, 8.114, reports of suspicious activity and potential threats to school, 8.115, plant security, and 8.116, video surveillance and electronic monitoring.
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Board member comments, Mr. Mathias.
Well, I think we're coming off a great weekend where our superintendent picked up the 2-step and carried it away with the what do they call it, the big ball?
Mirror ball.
Mirror
ball.
ball.
Mirror ball. But also, just a shout out to all those that put their time and energy to help the benefit of our kids through the Lake County Education Foundation. And also a special shout out to Carmen Bates, who gives so much of her time and is passionate about what she does for our kids. So Superintendent, congratulations, but also congratulations to all those that participated, because ultimately our kids won.
Yes.
Yeah, it was an amazing lineup. I have nothing. I'm good. He reiterated.
I'll ditto those remarks.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I also wanted to thank Dr. Landry. I had the privilege of going to one meeting. Accidentally, I got thrown onto an agenda. She was like, "Come on out," and it was really nice because it was actually a coordination of all of our community groups and like DCF and federal agencies and the courts. It was incredible to see how many services are actually coming together and finally coordinating to provide services for our kids, and how disparate things had previously been. So it's really great to see everything coming together, and I know how much work this plan has been, and I'm so impressed. I'm grateful to our taxpayers, but also grateful to you all for putting together a really good plan and a good use of their money. So thank you.
Just a couple things. The superintendent worked to get 3 of our new vehicles, our vans, with a wrap, and I believe it says Speak Out.
It has the Speak Out logo and anonymous tip line.
So if you see those going around the county, they're our vans, they're Lake County schools, but it's to give awareness out there in the community and also to all the students that may see it as well. But I think that's something that was great that she was able to do and accomplish, and in between her and Mr. Carr, they were able to get this. We were a little worried about when we were going to get the vans. I won't go too much detail about that, but we're glad that we at least got this on there. The other thing, before we meet again, teachers will be coming back Monday. The following Monday, the 12th, before our next meeting, will be our students, and we are anticipating a great first day. Between now and then, there'll be a lot of either lunches or breakfasts that will be for the staff when they're coming back, that different chambers will be putting together, and that board members have been asked to participate in, to be there, to help with and serve. So your board will be out working, and I'm sure that they'll probably try to get to a school or schools on the first day to try to make an appearance there to make sure that everything is going good. Not you? Well, I will. But we have a lot that's going on between now and the first day of school. We still have Cypress Ridge that they're finishing up the cafeteria there. We have some portables that were brought on site to some of our schools that are being wrapped up. So our maintenance department and our facilities department under John Carr is going all at it right now, trying to get things ready for the first day of school for the students to be back. And I compliment them for that, and I appreciate their hard work. And also all of the superintendent and her staff's work. And we just want to have a great first day. So with that said, I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. I'm just used to being last.
That's true.
This has got me all messed up. Superintendent, go ahead.
Just a few things. I just want to follow up on what you were just talking about with those wrapped vehicles. Although Mr. Carr and I did work on that, it was not due to us. It was in part to Mark Schwartz with Red Apple Media and Kevco Builders, Joe Zeiler, who was the generous donor of not only the wrapping of those vehicles, 6 of ours and 2 sheriff's deputies' cars, but also over 10,000 lanyards for every middle school student to wear with the Speak Out logo on there. And we're going to be recognizing them at an upcoming board meeting. So we're looking forward to bringing them before you and really thanking Joe for his support of this effort. I also wanted to mention at the last board meeting, we tried to schedule a workshop, and there was a lot of conflicts, and so I know that Natalie followed up with each of you to find out what was available, and I think we found that everyone was good for a workshop on Thursday, August the 15th at 1 p.m., and this will be for the budget and capital review, as well as the impact fee study with the consultant, and potentially one other item from Lauren DeRitter. And we'd like to follow that up with an executive session on collective bargaining. We don't anticipate that the initial part, unless the impact fee study goes a while, that those other items will be so lengthy. 1 o'clock.
And where? Here?
Here.
Here. I will be here unless I get a call. I'm on call with my uncle that I had to visit that has liver cancer, so, but I will be here if not being called away.
Okay.
And I'm on call if he needs help.
Okay. So Thursday, August the 15th at 1 p.m., and I'm sure that you'll get a reminder on that, followed by an executive session.
That's all?
That's all.
Steve?
2 quick things. One is that the hearing that you all had with Mr. Bradshaw, you'll recall, was at the board meeting. That particular employee has appealed your decision, so that was not completely unexpected. And secondly, apparently, from what I've got here, it's that time of year that the superintendent gets evaluated. So I'll be looking at the timelines and sending out things to everybody. Probably we'll need to get it back fairly quickly, so Mr. Mathias can't claim he deleted it by accident or ran over the hard drive or whatever happens at his place. But we would appreciate if you could get them back in a reasonable turnaround time.
Yeah.
I'll define it for you when I send your email.
Will you be making the obligatory phone call to remind us?
Well, where we are with the timeline is, if you'll recall from the last years, you would ask for some revisions to simplify it a little bit and make it a little bit more mastery-based, for lack of a better word. And so I've done that. I've now submitted that to Mr. Johnson to review in alignment with my contract, which would then have to change because it no longer matches what is in the contract, and then bring back the revisions to you. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule. If you remember last time, it was towards the end of August that I actually did a kind of where we are with all of our data, the plan and goals for the upcoming year. So we're currently working on that presentation, so that'll be coming at a workshop probably the end of August, and I believe by the contract, we have until mid-September to the end of September to get the evaluation completed. So We're just getting the revisions done so that you can look at it once he has reviewed it and bring it back to you, and making sure that the instrument that we're going to use meets your approval.
So we'll see this presentation before we're expected to return an
Correct,
evaluation,
yes.
right? Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to, y'all be already thinking you're late. That way you get it back to me within a reasonable 2 weeks after the deadline.
So reasonable is now like end of
Or
September.
you give me time to come up with excuses, so
Is that what I
thank you.
heard?
I heard that we had till mid-September. Isn't
That's
that
what I
what you
just
heard?
Oh, yeah, that was,
Which means November.
that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
That's all you have?
Yes.
No other items to be brought before the board at this time will be adjourned.